So one more thing, because I want to switch to Fanny. Fanny, see what she doing now. She
How
go.
about Fanny Five? That's the way I think of her. The Fifth Amendment. She really blew it, and she's supposed to be a member of her state's bar and seems to have absolutely no understanding of what the Fifth Amendment's about. She
Fanny,
should have
Fanny
taken it.
five. Fanny five. All right. So it says here, prosecutors stand by former militant's conviction, but blast judge's prior conduct as prosecutor. Georgia prosecutors defending the 2002 murder conviction of a one-time Black Panther leader known as H. Rap Brown say new DNA evidence still points strongly to his guilt in the shooting of two sheriff deputies. However, they also accused the case's original lead prosecutor, now a Fulton County judge who has handled several high-profile political cases, of grave and clear misconduct. The striking Wednesday filing by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis office acknowledges serious wrongdoing by the former prosecutor and an FBI agent involved in the original investigation. But it argues that modern DNA testing combined with ballistic evidence and trial testimony leaves little doubt that Brown, by then known as Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, was responsible for the attack that killed one deputy and wounded another outside of Al-Amin's Atlanta home. Former prosecutor Robert McBurney is a Superior Court judge and has been involved in some of the most politically charged cases in the country. Prosecutors describe his conduct in Al-Amin's trial as the most egregious issue in the case. Despite standing by the conviction, Willis office said it does not object to hearing to elevate the case in its entirety, potentially keeping alive the public reexamination of prosecution that has long divided civil rights advocates and law enforcement.
I know knew H. Rap Brown personally. I thought he was one of the great ones when it came to being able to inspire people. He got set up and originally arrested thanks to Maulana Ron Karinga, aka Ron Everett of the US organization, who started Kwanzaa. Now,
Well, I'm
I'll
curious.
leave it at that. In that particular case, I always thought was suspect in terms of his entire prosecution.
Mhm.
And I think it's an after effect attempt to save face for what they did, because the whole state has a problem with what they did to that man back when. And the situation with whether or not he is involved actively in that kind of thing is another point, but it's like the charge to the jury. If you find the witnesses lied about one particular aspect of his testimony, then you are entitled to infer that he lied about the whole thing.
So
So
it says
that's
here,
what you get here.
it says the lead prosecutor, McBurney, oversaw the special grand jury Willis used in her investigation that eventually resulted in an indictment of Trump and others over allegations that they illegally tried to overturn the president's narrow 2020 election loss in Georgia. Notably, though, McBurney barred Willis from seeking charges against the then state senator Burt Jones because she had hosted a fundraiser for his Democrat opponent in the lieutenant governor's race, which McBurney ruled created an actual and untenable conflict of interest. McBurney also declared Georgia's restrictive abortion law unconstitutional, a finding the state Superior Court has vacated in a case that is ongoing. A trifecta of issues. This case had a trifecta of issues which undermine the process and the public's confidence in justice. During closing arguments at trial, McBurney displayed the chart titled Questions for the Defendant and asked questions meant to focus the jury's attention on the fact that Al-Amin, aka H. Rap Brown, didn't testify. H. Rap Brown also had court permission to remain, I don't like this, to remain seated during the trial for religious reasons, including not standing when the jury entered. McBurney employed the jury don't stand for him. Federal courts have ruled that McBurney violated Al-Hameen's constitutional rights, but that is unlikely. His actions substantially affected the verdict. So this week,
Yeah, I know how that goes. It's the prejudicial effect wasn't that great. It was plain error, but it did not substantially influence the outcome. That's what they're saying.
So this week's filing says McBurney crossed the line from aggressive advocacy into misconduct that undermined the core principles of justice, accusing him of misrepresenting evidence and withholding critical information from defense. So why is Fani Willis all of a sudden bringing this up?
Okay, question is the man alive?
He's dead.
Yes. So why are they bringing it up? They're taking a dead man and trying to resurrect the case. Are they trying to get a posthumous pardon from the governor?
Nope.
Are they trying to do what?
She
What is their purpose?
Right. And I think the purpose is to discredit this judge.
Who is about to do what?
Well, what he did, I think what was it that he did that got her pissed off? He barred Willis from seeking charges against a state senator, Burt Jones, because she hosted a fundraiser for his Democratic opponent.
Fanny wants to do right for a change and go after somebody. So, okay, there you go. You have this political infighting. So you have two individuals, with due respect to both of them, who are allegedly utilizing the sacrosanct procedures of criminal justice to go do something other than bring somebody to justice.
Right. And
or maybe people need to be brought to justice, and you find out that, oh, wow, they should be investigated. But now that this person has corrupted the process by using it for what is the term now? Lawfare, they have discredited their actions. So people should look at it in a circumspect fashion. Is this truly an effort to seek justice for the people, or is it just another dodge that you find yourself on the other side of this time?
Right. So the lawyers for H. Rap Brown also maintain that Campbell planted guns used to shoot the deputies at the site where H. Rap Brown was arrested.
Okay.
Campbell,
I bring your attention to the Glass House tapes written by Louis Tackwood, part 1 and part 2, where he details that he was instructed to use the resources of the Los Angeles Police Department's burglary squad to go in, burglarize Angela Davis's premises, take the guns that were supposedly used in that Kern County courthouse shooting, and plant them so that they could become involved in the process. And he details it at great length, and I actually witnessed him testify in front of a murder trial where he was identified as Lieutenant Louis Tackwood of the Los Angeles Police Department's, I think it was, SIS unit, or Special Investigative Services unit. That was when I was doing extra credit thing, observing a murder trial and reporting on it for a law school course.
So it says here the FBI special agent James Campbell approached H. Rap Brown while he was on the ground in handcuffs, kicked and spit on him. "This is what we do to cop killers," the filing said. A reprimand of Campbell did not clear S.A. Campbell's stain on the investigation. So this is just, highlighting some of the stuff that went down with that incident.
They really jacked this guy up. Ron Corrigo, what he did was had his folk disassemble a carbine, an M1 carbine, And they had talked H. Rap Brown, and I was a witness to this. They had talked H. Rap Brown into letting them take his luggage to the LA International Airport, LAX, and in the process, they slipped this stripped, disassembled M1 carbine into the luggage when he was under charges of inciting a riot, stuff that we find Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi and all of the Democratic suspects doing on a regular basis, but he did just a little bit of what they were doing and he got indicted for it. So when they found the carbine in his luggage, not because it went through security, but because after they put it in there, they called and said, if you look in his luggage, you'll find disassembled carbine, and he got arrested, and that's how he wound up getting held with no bond for the rest of the proceedings. And this is just part of that whole thing. They wanted to get rid of somebody that, in the context of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and many others, probably was one of the most effective public speakers of the time. So, that's suspect to me.
So H. Rap Brown lawyers have also maintained that Campbell, the FBI agent, planted guns used to shoot deputies at the site where H. Rap Brown was arrested. Campbell had been transferred to Atlanta after shooting an unarmed Muslim man in the back of the head. The man's supporters accused Campbell's of planting a gun found at the scene. This was a previous situation. The judge did not allow the jury to hear about the prior shooting after the defense presented newspaper articles about it, wanting to use that shooting to demonstrate bias and motive to plant guns. If defense attorneys had presented recently interviewed witnesses rather than relying on articles, the judge likely would have allowed the jury to consider that information, the new filing argues. But this is what I'm saying about Fani. So this evidence wasn't allowed to be used in H. Rap Brown case, right? But you're saying today in 2026, you stand by the conviction of him being guilty.
Yeah, like the whole trial wasn't tainted. And my point of what the story was is I'm a witness to other instances of them planting evidence to get H. Rap Brown.
Right. So,
well, see, look, I was his bodyguard for a week in Los Angeles. This was way back in the 60s before any of this developed. And we inspected his luggage and said, do not trust these people. And he went ahead and trusted them anyway. So between the time his luggage was inspected by the people on the scene and it got to LAX, somehow or another, a disassembled weapon was put inside the luggage. We know that when it left the location, it was clean. We know that when it arrived at the location in question, it was dirty. And we know who had exclusive possession and control of that luggage in between point A and point B.
So it says the new DNA evidence. Al Amin's, aka H. Rap Brown, lawyers argue that nothing connected Al Amin to the guns used to shoot the deputies. Fani Willis' office used DNA testing that wasn't available at the time of the trial to test the guns and related items. The test excluded Al Amin's from the DNA found on both guns, but Al Amin's DNA was identified on a leather belt wrapped around one of the guns, the filing says. The evidence is a strong indication of his guilt, especially when paired with prior ballistic evidence and testimony. So it says the shooting. As a radical activist from the 1960s, Al Amin, aka H. Rap Brown, once said violence was as American as cherry pie, and that Black people will use violence if needed to fight oppression. He converted to Islam during a prison stint and moved to Atlanta in the 1970s, becoming the leader of one of the nation's largest Black Muslim groups, the National Ummah. So it says here, H. Rap
Okay,
Brown lawyers.
I heard that, the new evidence, the DNA stuff, but you said it was on a belt that was found wrapped around the gun. See, it's very easy to get something like a belt. You go in somebody's house or you go through their luggage or they get checked into a jail for some charges, they have to surrender their belts. So here you have at least one instance I know about where they falsified information and evidence and planted some. This is another instance where the allegations there. Now, we saw Fani Willis being very unreliable in what she testified to relative to her relationship to Attorney Wade and the circumstances that were going on with the Trump prosecution, the prosecution against the rap group, and by inference, the prosecution against the teachers. So if you can't believe somebody in one instance, you are entitled to infer that they're not being truthful in another one. So we don't have any evidence that is being offered that's subject to a defense testing it by rigorous and close cross examination before it is allowed to be admitted, and then attempting to impeach its likelihood for being valid and reliable by their own evidence. We just have Fani Willis's representation, and we've seen how totally unreliable Fani Willis is when it comes to making representations. So, in other words, can I make a plain language? This ain't shit. So bottom line is you talk shit, you lie and tell us shit, then don't expect us to believe the rest of your shit. Now, that's the way I'd characterize it.
Yeah, because my thing is like, what what are you doing? You're just focusing on the judge of this case, not to overturn, the man passed on, but it's just like what is the price? You know what this is? No. You know what this is? She is trying to deflect from everything that is going on with Fulton County elections, with the FBI, with her owing $17 million that the taxpayer is going to have to pay. Nathan Wade didn't come and testify. She's trying to deflect people attention off that onto this and sprinkle in some racism and civil rights nonsense.
And by the way, her father was a staunch supporter of H. Rap Brown.
Right. Because he was a Black Panther, wasn't he?
Excluding that, I went to school with him for 8 years. So I know what he expressed and what we talked about. And he was a staunch supporter, if I recall correctly, of H. Rap Brown. So now there you go. This is absurd. I don't believe anything that Fani Willis offers. It has zero credibility, and she's been impeached as a reliable witness to anything.